I'm honored to be here today with David Rome, who I have known for many years, off and on. You're a significant teacher in my world, in the Shambhala Buddhist community. You are very close with Trungpa Rinpoche, who founded Naropa and Shambhala. And you're the author now of Your Body Knows the Answer. So we're going to get into what this book is about, which is a very accessible practice that I think we all can do, and you'll teach it to us. So thank you for that. And we just begin with a bow of viewers. You can join in, a bow of mutual respect, and it's a nice little thing you can do in everyday life if you just need to reconnect with reality and life. So you can just take a good posture if you like, and offer respect to David and to what you're about to learn. You can connect with the earth below. You can kind of wiggle your butt a little bit and get grounded, and then connect with the heavens above, spaciousness, the sky above, and then connect the two in your heart and find your breath. And give it away. So David, if you're willing, if you would lead us or introduce us to the practice of focusing. Is that correct? What you would call it?
Yes. I was going to do the preliminary exercise, but it's so similar to what we just did that we can just go straight on.
That might be interesting to do that, though, because it must be slightly different as well, right?
Slightly different.
Would you mind doing both, maybe? Or is
Sure.
that... Yeah.
Fine.
Cool.
All right. So, focusing is all about getting in touch with your body, but not just your physical body, also what's called the felt sense. And it's very contemplative. And this first exercise, which is the first exercise in the book, is called gap. It's creating a gap from your everyday life, as you were just saying, but it also stands for grounded, aware presence. Grounded, aware presence.
That sounds nice.
Yeah. So we can do it together, and the viewers can do it.
Okay.
So bring attention to the body.
Do we close our eyes?
Usually, yeah.
Okay.
Don't have to. And first, just notice your physical body, your posture, any little aches and pains. But then really center your awareness at your base, where your bottom rests on the chair if you're sitting. And that really represents the earth and the support of the earth. And so that's the quality of being grounded, and you can say to yourself, grounded. And then bring your attention up and center it in the head, keeping your eyes closed, and really put all your attention on let your awareness come up and center in your head, and keeping your eyes closed, put all your awareness into the sense perception of hearing. Try to be very sensitive. Notice all the little sounds that usually we're not even conscious of. And also have a sense of the greater silence out of which the sounds come, and of the sense of space. Vast space. And so this is awareness, or aware, you can say to yourself, aware, grounded, aware. And then the third is present. So very similar to the bow exercise, center your awareness at your heart or your heart center, and you can bring a hand to your chest and really feel your own presence, just however you are just now. The quality of simply being present, being here. And then from here, we would keep awareness inside the body, the main part of the body, the trunk, and start to look for or be receptive to felt senses. So this preliminary exercise is preparing, it's not yet the felt sense.
Oh, I was waiting to say presence.
I'm sorry, you're right. And so
I'm just going to do that the whole hour.
And you couldn't say to yourself.
It would probably be my best interview yet if I just did that the whole hour and shut up. Thank you. That was really... it didn't feel... what do you call it? Conceptual. It didn't feel philosophical. It felt practical.
Yes, absolutely. And it's about directing awareness, and very similar to meditation, mindfulness awareness practices. But it's also a way of taking account of those qualities, what you call heaven, earth, and human.
So that's what we were doing in the bow. You connect with earth, the heavens above, and human. Yeah, it is so similar.
Yeah, in focusing we don't use those terms that come from the Chinese tradition, but make it more literal, the ground, what you're sitting on. You know, awareness, being sensitive to whatever sounds are happening just now, and then present to yourself, in yourself.
So where does this... So is that the practice that you call focusing, or are there many different practices within focusing?
That's just the preparatory practice. It's not yet focusing. But as I said at the end, now that the awareness is in the body and really in the interior space of the body, you're prepared to notice, to receive, to pick up what are called felt senses. And felt senses are subtle sensations, bodily sensations, but they're not just physical, they also are about something. We don't always know what they're about, but they have this quality of aboutness.
You're talking about some sort of tightness in the chest, or some sort of...
It could be. They can be tightness in the chest, it could be like a rock in your stomach.
Right. It's like what people call butterflies in your stomach.
Yes,
that kind of
butterflies in your stomach is a good example of one of the times when everyone notices it. Yeah. But there are many that are much more subtle.
Yeah.
And they are really the way that our body holds our life, holds our situations.
But not in a necessarily helpful way, right?
It becomes helpful, absolutely, yes.
But I mean, when we feel that fear or tightening up or nervousness or excitement, I mean, sometimes it's sort of like a muscle when you have a tight neck. It's your body's trying to help something by securing it, but it causes pain.
Yes, and so in focusing, you have to make friends with that pain. And rather than trying to avoid it or get rid of it, just welcome it and let it be there. But it's more than just the physical pain. And so once it's really present, and you may pick up a more subtle quality underneath the physical pain, and then you can begin to inquire, what's this about? What in my life may be bringing this quality?
So you studied a lot with Chogyam Trungpa. He talked about how emotions were sort of like bigger balls of tangled thoughts sometimes. Yes. Is that sort of the same idea, that these are often just tension accumulated kind of, I don't want to say trauma, but something like that? Neurosis? Or
well, the felt sense is not a negative thing. And it's different from emotion. I call it the feeling beneath the feeling. So when you're angry, then you may have tension, your heart may be racing, you may turn red. Right. But if you really come into your body in a very contemplative, gentle and friendly way, then you can start to sense, where is that coming from? What's the source of that? And so a typical example would be, anger is what you're feeling, but when you're able to really go inside and give some space, there's probably fear or vulnerability. Yeah. So
I actually, it's funny you say that, because often in my work life I get really stressed out, and if I'm, not always, but sometimes if I have a little gap, I often am like, why am I so so angry or stressed out about? And often it.
So this will be the perfect tool for finding that out.
And then I find the thing, and it's usually not something horrible. It's just some sort of frustration. It's almost soft.
Right, but in focusing, you can also explore why that has that effect on you. Yeah. Not just knowing what it was right now, but that's a pattern in you. Yeah. And why does that arise?
Yeah. Well, let's not talk about me. So, briefly, I want to touch on. People may know you now as the author of this focusing stuff. But you also come. In my world, you were a teacher and a student. You were a teacher of us and a student of Chogyam Trungpa, and you were his personal secretary, which was a pretty big deal.
Yes.
And you were the head of the sort of Buddhist Boy Scouts kind of thing.
Yes.
Which we call the Kasan.
Yes.
And so from my point of view, you're turning your attention, your focus, to focusing that means a lot. I'm curious how you encountered focusing and why you chose to, put, 15 years of your time, 20 years of your time into it?
So I actually explained this in the preface to the book. And the pattern was very similar to the way I discovered meditation in my 20s. I just stumbled upon it, but I knew there was something right about it. And I
talk about encountering the book,
I stumbled upon Trungpa Rinpoche's book, Meditation in Action, and then that really was the gateway for me to come into meditation practice. So sometime in the 90s,
So you need to stay out of bookstores, it sounds like.
I'll make an exception tonight.
Books just fall on you. And 20 years later.
I've had the experience a few times in my life, in fact. Just an auspicious coincidence. But I got into focusing as a way to be more in touch with my own feelings. I was a person who tended to be rather distant from my feelings. And so a way to make friends with the feelings and to be able to go a little deeper and discover what's this really about.
So maybe it's a dumb question, but why is it unhealthy then to be distant or to push away your feelings?
Yes, I would say so. But it's also unhealthy to be flooded by your feelings, to collapse into your feelings. And focusing works in both cases, because it's a question of getting the right distance from the feeling. So if you're too distant, you have to come closer, and really what you're doing is inviting the feeling to come closer, to be more present for you.
And that takes bravery, or what is that? Patience?
Well, mostly gentleness and patience, but also bravery, because you will discover some difficult spots, the ones that we don't like to see.
So the Buddha would say, not too tight, not too loose. Is that kind of what we're saying, how we should relate with our emotions?
In a broad sense, but I would say that in focusing there's more emphasis on the quality of gentleness. It doesn't have that quality of discipline that you get in mindfulness practice. I mean, it has its own discipline, but it's much more gentle, friendly, and in that sense loose, free-flowing.
So we all know that feeling of, butterflies or whatever it is, and is focusing. I was asking you this before, we just had dinner. Is this something you can do kind of in post-meditation or meditation in action when you're in your everyday life? I'm in an argument with my loved one or a colleague or my mother.
Yes, absolutely.
Or myself.
That's the whole idea, that focusing creates a bridge from the sitting practice of meditation to how you work with the specific situations that are going on in your life. If I may, I'll read the subtitle for the book because that explains it. Using your felt sense to solve problems, effect change, and liberate creativity.
And what's exciting to me is, so far maybe it sounds like we're talking about a kind of austere meditation practice, but we all are super consumed and troubled by when we're not synchronized with our emotions and our mind and our life.
Yes.
And this is something you can do on the spot.
Well, it takes some practice.
Sure.
You can't...
I'm not saying it's easy, but you can do it.
But yes, absolutely.
In the moment.
It's being present to your own experience in this particular subtle level of your own experience.
I was just thinking about 10 years of relationships that would have been easier if I could have had something like this.
But it's also about being able to move forward in your life, to grow, to change. And there's a wonderful saying by Carl Rogers, the American psychologist, says, it's a curious paradox that when you accept yourself just as you are, then you can change.
I love that.
Yeah.
I think Suzuki Roshi said a very similar thing.
Mm-hmm.
He said something like, you're perfect as you are and you need to...
You're right.
And there's room for improvement.
So, but the focusing is about discovering more of who you are. And it's an area that it can come up certainly in mindfulness awareness practice, but it also can be missed because in mindfulness practice you might notice something, then you let go. You come back to the breathing or whatever.
That's a really interesting point. So in Buddhist meditation practice, you touch in with sort of where you're at, and then you let go repeatedly. And you practice that. But with focusing, you're kind of going in.
You're going in, and then you're choosing to be with either a felt sense. You can start with the felt sense, or you can start with a situation.
Wow. So
I just did a demonstration on Monday night in my class. I had just heard about an old friend who had died, and I hadn't seen him in many, many years. And so I wanted to spend a little time kind of processing that and understanding really what that meant for me. So you can start with the felt sense, you can start with a situation, a challenge, a problem, and you can also just bring awareness into the body and then ask inside, what wants my attention just now? And but the key is you have to pause, not let it come from the head. You just give it space. What wants my attention just now? And often something that you weren't aware of or that you were not tracking shows up.
Well, even in the brief practice you introduced, I wasn't aware of any of the sounds that I very quickly was aware of. This sounds like it's almost like a warrior's practice that you can go into a difficult situation, whether it's your own experience or with a loved one or a mediation. I would assume mediators would love this kind of thing.
Yes, mediators and psychologists, and it's applicable in all walks of life. The second half of the book, the first half of the book is just building step by step the practice, explaining it with exercises, but the second half is how do you apply it to problem solving, to finding a next step, to relationships, to conflict. And
what page was that now? Yeah, that's great. Yeah. And so how many years has it been, the focusing practice for you?
It's about 17 years now.
So how has your own relationship with your own feelings or emotions changed?
Well, I have a relationship with my feelings. And you know, and I still need to make a little effort to spend time with them, because my tendency still is to be distant or avoid. So this is a tool, a way of saying, okay, I really want to be with this and let this show up and learn more what it's about.
And you were saying you feel like this is complementary to Buddhist meditation practice or to mindfulness practice.
Absolutely, because it's a contemplative way of working with the actual challenges in your life. So it creates a bridge from the contemplative practices of mindfulness awareness to the hubbub of your everyday life.
And I guess complementary is sort of a almost too kind of a word. Like there's actually almost like a missing step in the mindfulness.
It was for me. It was a missing link, and I think it is for many people. I've taught this now to my colleagues in the Buddhist community, and many of them say that, this I was missing.
I feel like in my experience that yoga has been a different kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like many of us meditators, we sit down and then 40 years later we get up with like a stiff back and, you know, a big belly. And like if you limber up, you know, yoga traditionally was there to limber you up for meditation practice. So it's almost like yoga is a good physical preparation, focusing is a good, what would you call it, emotional?
Well, it's kind of, in the psycho-emotional territory. But as I said earlier, it's very much about discovering what direction your being, your whole being, wants to move in. And frequently there are places where there are blockages or we're stuck. But by making more friends with them, we can loosen those up, and then fresh energy for living your life comes out.
So is that similar to Maitri practice, where you make friends?
The basic attitude is just like Maitri, loving kindness. It's bringing loving kindness toward yourself, empathy toward yourself. But where it differs is that you're then waiting patiently for something to show up that shows up in this curious bodily way, subtle bodily way, and yet it's not just physical, it's about something in your life.
So I'm curious, what do you think, you know, your teacher Trungpa Rinpoche would he have loved this?
Well, yes.
Who was the founder, gentleman of this?
Eugene Gendlin from University of Chicago.
Just hit it off and talked for hours or something?
Well, that I'm not sure. Gendlin actually came out, I think maybe the second year of Naropa, and he did not click with it. He thought meditation was a kind of escapism, which it can be.
Sure.
However, after I knew focusing and then going back and reading Trungpa Rinpoche, it's everywhere.
Did you meet Gendlin when he was at Naropa?
No, I wasn't even aware of that. It was many years later that I met him. Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah.
And you've studied in depth with him, Eugene Gendlin, and...
Well, I've studied with him and then other senior teachers like Ann Weiser Cornell, Robert Lee. There are many teachers all over the world now, focusing teachers, and it's a real movement.
I think when I first heard about it, which was sort of by accident, I was on my way to a beginner's meditation class upstairs after a yoga class, actually, at the Shambhala Center, and I heard your voice, which is, in my life, is a revered voice. And I literally, in the hallway, I said, oh, is there a David Rome, like, audio cassette being played or something, you know? That's weird. And they said, no, David's in there. And I said, oh, you mean physically he's in there? I had to ask it 4 times. And then I went in, and the whole focusing thing, you know, seemed like a nice contemplative meditation practice. But it was only later, I think, sort of preparing for this, that I realized this is actually a really exciting thing, that you can directly engage with all the kind of caught up, pent up, stuck stuff in the moment, and also in sort of extended contemplative practice.
Yes, and directly is the key word, because you know, when we're thinking, there's a relationship, but it's not a direct relationship. You know, thinking is in words which are symbolic.
Right. It's like pointing at the moon instead of the moon.
Right.
Yeah.
And felt sense really is directly experiencing how your body is living itself just now.
So if someone has trauma in their life, is focusing kind of dangerous for them to do, or is it?
Well, it could be.
Yeah.
Trauma, often one needs to work with a trained person, a therapist. However, the practice is extremely helpful in working with trauma.
I would imagine,
And one of the keys to working with trauma is what's called the threshold of tolerance, increasing your threshold of tolerance, increasing what you're able to be present with and not freak out.
Yeah, it's like me watching a horror movie. I can usually make it like 20 seconds, and then I have to like hide my head.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so focusing really increases your window of tolerance, and so it's a very valuable tool in working with trauma.
But is it truly direct? I mean, you're not, let's say I have thoughts of I'm depressed. So if I connect directly with depression, is there a danger of getting more caught up in the depression?
No, I wouldn't say so. You know, trauma is a special case because there's a danger of re-traumatizing.
Sure.
But with depression, and it's not the depression itself so much that you're spending time with, but you're allowing what's kind of under the depression to show itself, to come into focus.
So I know this isn't exactly a focusing subject, but you came out of this rich experience, a very privileged experience. I mean, you had more direct and intimate student-teacher relationship with Chogyam Trungpa than just about anybody. So what was that like, and how did you meet him, and what was that hard and fun and all that?
All of the above and much more.
Yeah.
At times, especially when I first started working with him, he was very gentle and tender with me. My father had died when I was 19 years old.
Wow.
And so now I was 25 or a bit older, and he really became a kind of surrogate father.
Wow.
But as happens as you grow up, then there were times when he had to be tougher on me.
Once you were stronger, he could be tougher.
Yeah.
So what was how long did you work with him directly as secretary?
9 years.
So what was your daily life like?
Well, it changed over that time. At the very beginning, I was doing everything. I was going up, waking him up in the morning, getting him his tea, his breakfast, helping him dress because he was partly paralyzed, driving him to the office, seeing him through his day. He would do a lot of 10-minute interviews with the students, but then
like
often,
meditation interviews or something.
Yes, and other meetings and planning Naropa Institute and things like that. He was such a creative, extraordinarily creative person.
And you had to facilitate that.
Well, I was keeping a schedule, and so in that sense, I was, and sometimes I was involved with the actual conversations.
But I mean, after a meeting, you would have to get things done related to that. Because all of Shambhala or Vajradhatu at the time was expanding incredibly rapidly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I don't know if people realize, but Trungpa, Shambhala was, or Vajradhatu at the time, was the biggest community, burgeoning, very exciting, kind of, very romantic, and when he passed away, it was in Time magazine on the cover of Time, New York Times. It was a pretty big deal, kind of thing.
Trungpa is somewhat controversial because of his ability to be very outrageous.
I hadn't heard that.
I'm sure that history will show that he was one of the really important figures in bringing Eastern and Western culture together, and in the shift in Western culture toward more self-awareness and genuineness.
And with an incredible sense of humor as well.
Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, when I grew up in that community, and I would see that he would be doing poetry here and art here and dressage here and, seminary, this 3-month Buddhist training, college kind of thing here in Naropa. How did that all work day to day? I mean, it's almost like we need a documentary of it. Like, how did that look on a daily basis? He was an actual human being. Had to eat meals and...
Yes.
Yeah. I don't know if that makes sense. I mean, how did all that unfold? Was it just incredibly overwhelming and chaotic, or was it?
Well,
organic?
it wasn't chaotic around him.
Uh-huh.
There was always this space and stillness. But then as soon as you got beyond him, you left the office, then it tended to get chaotic. But he had an extraordinary ability to, with spending only a relatively brief amount of time with the person, to get them off and running on big projects, like Naropa or a magazine or a newspaper or a theater group, and many. And it didn't take him seemingly very much effort or time to trigger those. He knew how to do that. He would have a sense of what your potential is, and then he would say, all right, you should try this, or why don't you do such and such?
Yeah.
And then come back in 6 months.
Or 10 years.
Well, no, 6 months. Later it got less frequent because there were so many students.
I guess my point was not that he didn't have time, but like I remember him doing that with my mother, saying you should do Shambhala training or whatever. And she went off and he had a high voice, and she went off and did that. And that one meeting set a direction of her life, from going this way to that way for 10 years.
Yes.
Yeah.
And, I had the unique privilege of being in his physical presence, all day long for many years. And so I feel like I absorbed a lot, and maybe that's why I'm like the felt sense. I absorbed a lot from him in a non-conceptual way.
I bet.
So it's like it lives in my body, but I may not even know it yet or recognize it yet. So, but then he shows up in all these different ways.
Yeah. So maybe as a final note, because I know we have to wrap up this, but working with him wasn't just work, right? Work was practice. Work was meditation practice, or your Dharma path. Is that correct?
Yes. Well, you had to practice also. He was very firm about that.
Meditation practice.
Meditation, yes. But of course, it was a practice being with him.
Yeah. Yeah, I find that super inspiring. As an entrepreneur, we're always super busy, and we're always doing this and accomplishing that and trying this, and we're very mission driven, but it does feel like work. And there was a quality around Vajradhatu even on the periphery as a child, where I recognized that for people their path of service was their practice, and yes, they had to practice and study as well, but that you were learning by doing.
Very much so, and there was a feeling of really creating a whole community and the different aspects of community, whether it was finance or law or education, and so we all had what he called our seat, our place in that, what we were contributing, but it all connected.
That's like natural hierarchy, something like that?
Yes, could be.
Yeah. All right. Well, David Rome, author, Your Body Knows the Answer. Thank you so much. It's an honor.
Thank you.
Yeah, David. Subscribe.